Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. My name is Arseni, and in this video I'm continuing my deep dive into the Domains of Dread. Domains of Dread are little kind of settings that appear in Wizards of the Coast, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. And if you want to find out more, go check out the first video in the series. I'll put the link in the show notes below and somewhere on the screen. So what I'm doing in these videos is I take a detailed look at each of the 20 or so domains. Yeah, I think it's 20 domains. 20 domains of dread, the ones that are actually described in detail. And I look at things like atmosphere and feel, genres, who are the darklords, the rulers of these domains, what are the kinds of stories you can tell, the GM tools, which I personally find to be one of the most important parts of the book for me, is like, what are the tools that the GM has at their disposal in order to run a good adventure or even a good campaign. And I also take a little bit of a look at like the history of the domain in terms of what it used to be like before, for example, in 3rd edition or even 2nd edition, and kind of like how it has changed. I am sorry that it took me this long to get to this video. I have been teaching summer school for the last few weeks, and trust me when I say that the only thing worse than being a student at summer school is being a teacher in summer school. It is a tremendous amount of work. But I have a bit of a lull, so I decided I'll finally get this video done. So, without further ado, we're going to talk about Mordent next. And the first domain on our list is Mordent. Mordent is actually the 2nd oldest domain in Ravenloft lore, and it first appeared in this module that you see in front of you. The iconic cover that many people associate with the first module, Castle Ravenloft, is actually the cover for the 2nd module called Ravenloft 2, The House on Griffin Hill, which is quite an ironic title because, first of all, it's not actually set in Castle Ravenloft at all. Strahd, who does appear in this module, is a completely different person. And in general, this module has little to do thematically or narratively with the original Castle Ravenloft module. There are some connections, but they are optional for the most part. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about this entire module, but one of the interesting things about this module was, first of all, it introduced the concept of domains, and it kind of prepared us for the idea that there is more than just Barovia out there in the mist, because it introduced Mordent, which makes it the 2nd oldest domain. It also introduced some other key players in Ravenloft lore, such as Azalin Rex, the Lich from Darklords, is actually mentioned for the first time in this domain, as is the Alchemist, another mysterious figure that we're going to be seeing when we look at Mordent in its current edition. So that's to say that Mordent has a very long and very storied pedigree. That means that there is a lot of official material about Mordent, from campaign setting books to novels to even, I think there was at least one, maybe 2 video games, one of which at least was set in Mordent. So, what is Mordent? Well, Mordent is a domain of dread, which is based, unlike Castle Ravenloft or Barovia, it is not based on Eastern European folklore. Instead, it is based on the various English Gothic writers who popularized the whole haunted mansion, haunted country house. Think stories like The Haunting of Bly Manor, which was on Netflix recently, which itself was based on an older story. Stories such as The Yellow Wallpaper, The Turn of the Screw, and just kind of stories like this, right? So if you kind of get a sense of like, oh, big old rambling mansions haunted by ghosts that rattle chains, you kind of have a good idea of what Mordent is about. Okay, and in addition to all of the haunted mansions, haunted by ghosts, it's also home to sea-blasted shores, mist-shrouded moors, and other such other such imagery from various English, Scottish, Welsh, and I don't know, even to some extent Irish traditions as well. So it's kind of it's another body of kind of horror from Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's got its own rich history of the kinds of horror stories that it's based on. So the domain of Mordent is was originally set in the core, but now it is its own self-contained domain, and there is a wonderful map. I really like this map. It's one of my favorites in the book. This map of Mordent, which is actually not too dissimilar from some of the previous maps of Mordent. You can see that it's a domain of a lot of forests and rivers, a great kind of swamps and moors, a very suspicious radioactive radioactivity warning sign down there, right? And some kind of things like that. And I just have to really say that I really like Mordent. It's one of my favorite domains, not just in this book, but in previous books as well. And in fact, my current Ravenloft campaign is set in Mordent, so I really like it. I really like ghost stories, and I also really like kind of the lore and the feel of Mordent in general. So one of the interesting things about Mordent is that if someone dies in Mordent, their spirit does not find rest automatically. So every spirit in Mordent comes back as a ghost until they're put to rest. So that makes Mordent a wonderful campaign setting for kind of Victorian Ghostbusters. It does have a bit of a higher tech level than Barovia, in my opinion anyway. And certainly in the older editions, it's certainly was of a higher tech level. So you can definitely make it a lot more Victorian with things like gas lanterns, firearms, and big fancy carriages and things like that. So it's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that. And like it says here, on the surface, Mordent appears to be just this quiet, peaceful country of hard-working farmers and sheep herders, and especially fishermen. Where everyone knows their place, and everyone is very much bound by tradition. But actually, under the surface, there's all kinds of horrors going on, and of course, the vengeful or kind of not vengeful, but unquiet ghosts of the past are basically kind of forcing everyone to behave in certain ways that do not challenge the established order. And I really like that. I think it's a very neat idea compared to kind of just previous themes where it was just like, well, there's just a bunch of ghosts. Now it's like, ooh, how do these ghosts actually affect the living? So I think that's a really neat idea. So like I said, geographically, it's the domain with a lot of dark forests and rivers, swamps, moors, but also a lot of sea coast and islands. So you could even kind of lean into some of that lore, like fisherman and sailor lore. And so if you've watched the excellent Lighthouse movie with William Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, which is an amazing movie. This is the kind of thing that you could definitely lean into. So, as to who is the Dark Lord, so the Dark Lord of the domain has always been, ever since the house on Griffin Hill, the Dark Lord of this domain has been Lord Wilfred Godfroy, or Godefroy. I always said Godfroy, but it's technically Godefroy. And there's a good... No, sorry, there is a piece of art which shows him, but it's in a different chapter, so... I'm not gonna bother going into it right now, but it's pretty good art. And Lord Godefroy is a not an especially powerful ghost on his own, but he does lord over most of the other ghosts in Mordent. He actually torments them, and he uses the ghosts of Mordent as hostages in order to force the living to spy for him or to do his bidding. Even though most people in Mordent don't actually realize that that's what's going on. And he's basically a sadistic bully who had killed his wife and child out of petty jealousy. He's a really nasty piece of work. He might lack the kind of the aristocratic manner and intelligence of somebody like Strahd or Azalin Rex, but he makes it up for it in just like his sadistic streak and just his just sheer cussedness, and the fact that, you know, even though you will always find him in the Griffin Manor, hence the title of the module, right? He can actually appear anywhere in Mordent. So just like Strahd, he can actually roam around in the domain and haunt you anywhere. And good luck trying to, good luck trying to defeat him. Like, okay, with Strahd, like maybe you could hammer, a stake through his chest and all that. With Godfroy, it's like, this guy does not want to move on. How do you deal with that, right? So it's pretty cool ideas that you can do around that. In terms of genres, so it says that obviously ghost stories are a good genre for this domain. Absolutely. But I think you could also do folk horror very well, because it's very well established both in this book and the previous books that the people of Mordent are actually pretty superstitious, and they have a lot of different legends, some of which are true, such as the Foghounds, the Boghounds, various like little beasties of the forest, creatures of the fish folk from the sea. So think Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth. So you can do folk horror pretty well as well. You can do psychological horror. The whole one of the things about Mordent, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is that it has a history. It has a certain shared past with a mysterious figure called the Alchemist. Okay, and the Alchemist invented a machine called the apparatus, and the apparatus basically allows souls to be switched. Okay, and those souls don't have to be souls in Mordent, so it's actually a way for a Dark Lord, for example, to switch their soul with somebody else and therefore escape the domain of dread, which, by the way, is the plot of the House on Griffin Hill, the original module, as well as several novels set in Ravenloft. And because of this apparatus, what it means is that in Mordent, you could be possessed by a ghost, or maybe you find your soul swapped with somebody else's. And so what kind of, so you could do some interesting psychological horror around that. You can also do slasher horror, could work very well. And you could even do cosmic horror. There are some sites that are described in this book and previous books that certainly kind of do call to mind some of Lovecraft's stories. I mentioned Shadow over Innsmouth, but the Dunwich Horror, I think, is actually an inspiration behind one of the locations in Mordent. So you can do a lot with this domain. Its atmosphere and feel, well, you're getting a lot of haunted house ghost story type type of things. So you know what kind of atmosphere and feeling you're going to get. A lot of desolate locations, blasted heaths, desolate moors, old half-decayed mansions and country homes. The mists and fogs of Mordent are already quite notorious. Also, the endless crashing of the seas on the coast, quiet villages with their reticent villagers. All of those things you can find in Mordent. Okay, so it's pretty evocative. You know, it's a very classic kind of ghost story type of atmosphere and feel. So you kind of should know what you're getting. In terms of its geography, like I said, there is this wonderful map, and the locations in Mordent are actually fairly fleshed out. A lot of it focuses on Mordenshire, which is the kind of the capital and the largest town in Mordent. And actually there's a lot of materials on Mordenshire in previous editions, including I think even Dragon Magazine had an issue. So you can find a lot of information about Mordenshire if you're not satisfied with just what's here. There are some additions. For example, like this new Almist Inquisition. This is the new introduction to Ravenloft. They have a kind of a hidden cell in Mordenshire. It is also the base of operation for the Rudolf van Richten, right, the titular character of this book. And actually, in my own campaign in Ravenloft, my players, Rudolf van Richten is their patron, basically. And they also introduce, it's also the home of Jennifer and Laurie Weathermay Foxgrove, who have been a staple in Ravenloft for, well, ever since 2nd edition. Okay, so there's a lot of famous people, famous NPCs that your party can run in Mordenshire. There's information on Heather House, Idlethorpe, Sigil Lakes, and you can also find a bit of information in other sources, as I've said, on other locations. So it's fairly well detailed. You know, you can kind of see here, right? Like, oh, this is a little bit different, right, from Barovia, right? So there's some stuff on the Dark Lord Godefroy himself. Kind of what are his different powers. For example, after 24 hours, the spirit of anyone who dies in Mordent reappears as a ghost, a specter, or another incorporeal undead. So you can have a field day. You know, you can have, so of course you can have ghosts and specters, but you could have banshees, wraiths. You could have sword wraiths from, I think, what is it, Mordekainen's, I think. The Mordekainen is a Volo's guide, and you can easily incorporate any other spirit from any other official or third-party source, and so you can take any kind of spirit, kind of a ghostly creature, put it there, boom, and you've got yourself a story, and they'll fit right in. You can also put a lot of fey creatures in here as well, so kind of good to know. Anyway, so we got some information about Lord Godefroy, who he is, what he's driven by. This is all fine. How to roleplay him. Okay, and then we come to the GM tools. So I really like the GM tools, and this is another reason why it's one of my favorite domains in this book. So first of all, you get 8 adventure seats, and they're pretty good adventure seats in general. And some of them actually call to older adventures. There's one about this one. Yes, the Westcote Manor. It's actually a reference to another module. To another Ravenloft module that was quite popular, but now I can't remember what it was called. And it was like about breaking the curse of Westcote Manor. So the apparatus. So there, you see another reference to the apparatus. So you know, it's pretty good adventure seats. Okay, so the actual tools that I really like are the tools to create a ghost story, and they have really good advice, very short but very good advice about like what makes a ghost story special, right? And that it's not just about like, oh, there's a ghost, go kill it, like, you know, kind of Ghostbusters. All right, we're gonna, like, you know, trap it and put it in the trap and whatever. Like, no, you have to put a ghost to rest. You need to understand its past, and also its connection to the living, and so that makes ghost stories much more of an investigative challenge than okay, we kick down the door in Castle Ravenloft, and you know we're gonna, like, you know, kill the monsters, take the loot, and spring the traps. Here it's like, no, you actually have to investigate and you have to find out more about the history. And the GM tools in this section do a really good job of helping you generate and put together a decent ghost story. And if you combine these tools with the tools in chapter 2, I think you could make so many cool and very different ghost stories. Like, ghost stories don't have to be like a very kind of single note genre. You can do a lot of stuff with ghost stories, which is one of the reasons why I like it. Oh, there's the art. Yeah, never mind. Okay, yeah. So there's Lord Wilfred Godefroy and his minion ghosts are dragging yet another unfortunate ghost into servitude. I love this picture. It's such an awesome picture. Love the art in this book. And so then you can kind of put it all together by deciding who is the actual villain. Does it have to be a ghost, or could it be somebody living, or maybe another ghost altogether, or something like that? How do you begin the story? What can the characters do? And how is the story going to end? So overall, I think very good tools, well outlined domain, a lot of material that you can use from other sources. It's all pretty well written, and there's a wide variety of the kinds of stories you could tell in Mordent. You're not limited. You're not limited by only a few kinds of stories like some of the other domains, especially the next one that we're going to look at. Okay, and speaking of the next domain on our list is Richemulot, or some people say Richemulot, but it's supposed to be French, so it should be Richemulot, I suppose. I should ask my wife. She's French. Maybe she'll know how to properly pronounce it. Now, the domain of Richemulot is another fairly old domain, and it goes all the way back to the 2nd edition. So it's not one of the new domains. It is, however, a domain that has changed quite a lot from previous editions. In the previous editions, especially in the 3rd edition, Richemulot was kind of a boring domain. It was kind of a boring backwater with it was like a very egalitarian, peaceful society that lives in like 3 strangely very large cities, so that the population is very small, and it was pretty peaceful aside from like the schemes of like some of the elite, or what passed for elite. That's all gone. That's out. About the only thing that it really keeps are the names: Pont-à-Mouseux, Saint-Roger, Mortigny, the Musée, the Mossard River. It keeps the Darklord, so the Darklord hasn't changed very much, and it keeps the rats and the were-rats, and it really focuses on that a lot more. So before it was like this peaceful domain, but now it's like this really desperate domain that is constantly under siege, not by an army, but by a plague, both a literal plague as well as a plague of rats and were-rats. So if you can picture, if you know, for example, video game Dishonored, it's got very strong Dishonored feel to it, but also like imagery of plague doctors, in the plague masks, but also images of like pre-revolutionary France. That's a big part of like the feel of this domain. It's kind of pre-revolutionary France, or like France on the edge of revolution. And this domain seems to me to be a lot more thematic, or I should say, it seems to me that it makes a lot more of a kind of a political or social statement than most other domains do. Because this domain really focuses on the extreme inequalities, particularly socioeconomic inequalities in society, and the dangers of those inequalities for everyone in society, rich and poor alike. And this may turn away some players and GMs, and some might see this as as something interesting to play in, to maybe kind of do a bit of a meta commentary on our world. So Richemulot is a domain of a few communities. There's really only 3 communities: Mortigny, Saint-Ronge, and Pont-à-Mousseau, that are not constantly, but regularly under siege by the plague and the rats, and so the whole domain exists in a state of martial law. Now, unfortunately, we get this wonderful map. We don't get much information on what's outside the city walls. We get a bit of an explanation of like different communities. So we have some noteworthy features, but note that these are noteworthy features not on the geography or the land itself. It's like about like the plague and the cities. And then for settlements and sites, we get Pont-à-Mousseau, Saint-Ronge, and Mortigny, and that's it. What else is this domain supposed to be like? Right? Like, what's the climate like? Are these estates of the nobility that live in cities, or are they somebody else's, or what's going on there? Why is this called Assassin's Echo? Is that the lake or the forest? Not too sure. Anyway, so it's pretty light on the details. I did mention that this domain is a very old domain. It goes all the way back to the 2nd edition. However, it is completely changed in this book. So, you could look to the past for inspiration about if you want to flesh out this domain a bit more, but I wouldn't expect to find a lot of overlap. I certainly did not. It is very evocative, however. Like, the stuff that is there is quite atmospheric. The silent, heavily armed guards of the Casque Silencieuse watch over calm promenades and markets. But a day or week or a month later, the first telltale cough cracks amid the crowds, and so on. And it's all very evocative, and it's great. I love it when books really evoke a sense of place and emotion. At the same time, I'm not here to read a story. I kind of want a bit more substance, and I didn't quite get that in this domain. So that's my criticism of it. Anyway, on to the Dark Lord. So the Dark Lord of the domain is Jacqueline Renier, and I love this picture actually because you can tell like all this imagery of rats. At first you're like, oh, it's like a fur fur mantle, and then you're like, oh no, wait, these are rats, and like her shoes are rats, and she has a necklace in the shape of a rat and all that stuff. So you can pretty much tell right away, right, that Jacqueline Renier is really, really into rats. And in fact, well, she is one. She's a were-rat, and she lords over a court of were-rats. Now, her backstory has changed a bit, but I actually like the new backstory better. I actually like this new backstory a lot better. It does make that social commentary that she's like one of those extremely privileged, extremely rich elites who really basically couldn't care about the lives of the common people, and she's content to let them basically be shut out and die. If you're familiar with Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of the Red Death, right, this is clearly the inspiration. Clearly the inspiration for that. And yeah, no, she's basically a were-rat, and she controls other were-rats. And she was punished for the fact that she treated her people so horribly. Now, Jacqueline Renier herself isn't particularly dangerous per se. And this could be one of the criticisms, right? This is one of the criticisms of this book is actually that the Dark Lords don't have stats. They're usually like, oh, he's a mummy lord, or he's a ghost. In Jacqueline's case, she's a were-rat, and it's like, well, they're not very powerful, right? But the idea isn't necessarily that you take them head on, right? One of the ideas is that, well, you kind of have to escape or unravel the mystery behind like what's going on. I do think Jacqueline Renier could have been buffed up, and I already have some ideas about like how I would write her stats and what kind of cool rat and disease powers I could give her. So there's a lot of nasty stuff you could do there. So yes, her story has changed a bit. Actually, sorry, quite a bit. I like her new story a lot better as kind of like a poignant. Oh yeah, she's like this rich noble who basically let her people die, and she was punished for it, and now she can't seem to escape that cycle. Genres. So genres, it says disaster horror and gothic horror. Absolutely, that's very appropriate. But I think psychological horror could work with the whole idea of like, well, what is it like to like be suspected by your neighbors of having an illness, right? Oh, I'm recording this in 2021, so we've all lived through a pandemic, so we kind of have some idea of what that might feel like a little bit, right? Here it's like magnified 100 times fold, so you could do some good psychological horror as well, and of course body horror. I mean, just if you ever played the game Innocence, A Plague Tale, right? It's the one with like these enormous, kind of oddly beautiful rat swarms, right? Like the kind of body horror you can really do with rats, and scenes of devouring and body parts falling off due to the plague and all that stuff. Ugh, just really yucky stuff that you can do with it. So its atmosphere and feel, I would say that this domain reminds me a lot of Falkovnia in an important way, and that is that it's a one-trick domain. Falkovnia, for example, was very much focused on war. Like that defines the whole domain, like the endless war against the hordes of the living dead. All of Richemulot, the way, at least as far as it is described, is focusing on the plague. It is all about surviving, living through the plague. That's all. That's all there is to this domain, at least the way it's described. And unfortunately, there isn't much more than that. Not in this book anyway. So in terms of kind of its atmosphere and feel, you get like the desperate, crowded urban environments and barricades, plague doctors, these menacing, silent helmets, right? Casque silencieux means silent helmet. They're actually empty suits of armor that are filled with intelligent rat swarms, which is pretty ironic, right? Because they're actually supposed to be the protectors of the public. Which I like this imagery. It's also kind of calls to mind a little bit Dark Souls and Bloodborne type of stuff. Anyway, but that's kind of what you're getting. Like that's the feel, the desperation, the rotting, dangerous urban environments, plague doctors, plague pyres, mass graves, all that horrible stuff, basically. So like Falkovnia, it's a bit of a one-trick domain. In terms of GM tools, not a lot of adventures. There's only 6 adventure seeds, and some of them are like, well, that's kind of just like what happens. Like, oh yeah, swarms of rats nightly slip into homes and murder the resident cats. Okay, I mean, I like cats. I want to defend cats, but pet owners entreat the characters for aid, so go down to the basement or into the sewers and kill some rats. I mean, I don't need a book to tell me how to do a rat hunt. Like, it's such a D&D staple. Some of them are better though. They're some of them are pretty good. Like unseating Jacqueline Renier and exposing her as the were-rat that she is in order to break her power, etc. That's actually pretty good. Alright, as far as the GM tools go, so again, not a lot of adventure seeds. Now, this is the other way in which this domain reminds me a lot of Falkovnia, and that is that the GM tools in this domain really focus on telling one specific adventure. or maybe a series of a couple of adventures, and that is about surviving the plague. And I think that's actually really good. Just like with Falkovnia, like if you want inspiration on how to run a siege of a city, or like a living dead zombie plague scenario, go check out Falkovnia, because it's got very good tools to do that. Similarly, if you want to do like this whole like outbreak of a plague, and and the desperation and everything that comes with that, this is the domain for you. Like, these are the tools you can take from here, and you can put them in your own campaign, your own setting, or use them as inspiration. So I really like this. But on the other hand, all the GM tools are centered around that. I love this picture. Again, the art is great, right? Like, you got a bit of a Dishonored / Bloodborne feel, lycanthropes in Bloodborne, lycanthropes in Richemulot, pistol and dagger. I love this stuff. And it's got like cycle of the plague. How do you run like the early plague, like stage 1, threat, stage 2, outbreak. You've got encounters for stage 2 encounters, then stage 3, illness, and stage 3 encounters, and then finally, full on pestilence, and like this is it. This is the the rat swarm apocalypse. It's great stuff. I really like these GM tools. I just wish there was a little bit more about the rest of the domain. It seems to me like this domain is basically, hey, you go there and you're gonna have a surviving the plague adventure. What else can you do there? You can hunt some rats and maybe go to a ball. Well, you already do that in Damon Liu, right? So what makes this like special? So in that regard, I wish there was a little bit more. Okay, and on to the next domain, and it is Tepest. And Tepest, which is how it was pronounced in the earlier editions, and so I'm still going to call it Tepest, not Tepest. Tepest is another one of my favorite domains in this book. So along with Harakir, Mordent, Lamordia, Mordent, Lamordia, Harakir, and this is the other one that I really, really like. I think I lost a track. And that's because I also really, really like folk horror. So Tepest is a domain of folk horror. So if you've seen movies like Wicker Man, Midsummer, both the 1971, 72 Midsummer, as well as the recent one with Florence Pugh, which is fantastic, or if you've seen The Apostle, which is amazing, by the way, go check it out. It's on Netflix, and it's really, really, really good. It's an overlooked horror movie, and it really shouldn't be. So if you know kind of these kinds of movies and kind of inspirations for folk horror, smiling people doing really, really, really messed up stuff to themselves and to others, all in the name of like perpetuating ancient deities and monsters of the woods and fairy folk and stuff like that. That's what you're getting here. So this domain is a domain of folk horror. In fact, there is only one settlement in all of Tepest. Let's go to the map. So the village of Viktal is currently the only inhabited village in Tepest, and there used to be others such as Kelly, but they're not inhabited anymore. Ooh, what happened there? Well, I'll find out. And so there's this village, very nice village. Nothing wrong goes on at all in Viktal. You don't want to go there. And the rest of the domain is a lot of woods and hills and rivers and lakes. Now, Tepest is another old domain. It goes all the way back to 2nd edition, like Richemulot. Unlike Richemulot, Tepest has not changed geographically. So a lot of the stuff, a lot of the locations, such as Brujamonte, Mount Arak, the Cauldron, Goblin Wood, Brigdarrow, and Vichwold Mountains, like they were in the old Tepest as well. So if you want kind of more materials as inspiration for running this domain, you can find them. the Dark Lord of the domain is also the same Dark Lord as, or almost the same Dark Lord as the older editions. So, however, in other important ways, it is quite different from previous editions. For example, in previous editions, Tepest was this forested land of many tiny villages and a brutal inquisition that was going around rooting out heresy and slaying anyone who consorted with the witches and the fairies of the woods. That whole inquisition thing is gone, and instead the focus is now on folk horror and the creatures of the forest and making sinister and desperate bargains. So I really like that. I really like hags. I think that certain real-world connotations aside, hags are a wonderful monster type in D&D because they could be very dangerous combatants, but they could also be very strange allies, patrons, and more. So that's the domain. It is very much focused on like fairy creatures, witches, dark bargains, buried past, and strange and unsettling rituals. So if you like that kind of stuff, which I personally do, Tepest is the right or the wrong place for you. In terms of its Dark Lord, let me just go to her. There we go. That's Mother Lorinda. I love Mother Lorinda. There's Mother Lorinda. She looks so happy. Just ignore the knife hidden inside the doll or the whatever that's supposed to be. Mother Lorinda is one of a coven of 3 hags, and in the previous edition, those 3 hags were the Dark Lords of Tepest, so they ruled together. However, it would appear that this Tepest is actually, which I found to be interesting, is actually a historical continuation of previous editions, because it talks about how Lorinda actually finally triumphed over Lavida and Letitia, who were the other 2 hags that were mentioned in previous editions. And given the fact that the locations are still the same, the geography is very similar, it really, to me, seems like, yeah, maybe this is not a completely different redesign, but more like Tepest 100 years later or something like that. That's just my speculation there. Anyway, Lorinda is, yeah, she's the mother, right? She's known as the mother to the natives. They love her, and they give her many gifts, and in return she makes them fertile. And in fact, that is one of the big themes of this domain, the idea of like fertility and harvest, and what are people willing to do to get either or both. Because one of the problems is that unless Mother Lorinda wants it, people of Tepest cannot conceive. And so they have to go and appeal to her to receive a good harvest, but also more importantly to get children, to get progeny. And she drives all kinds of interesting bargains for that, and it also means that actually one of the new races, well, not races, new lineages introduced in the book, right? The hag ones, forget what they're called. This is embarrassing. The hex blood, yeah. The book, this section actually specifically says that there's a lot more hex-blooded people living in Tepest than anywhere else. So if you want to make a hex-blooded character, they could be from Tepest, and they might kind of just have all kinds of really strange, curious customs that other people might find unsettling. Maybe. Anyway, that could be a cool story. She is a green hag. Lorinda is a green hag, but she is an extremely powerful one, and she does have some powers that I'm going to show a bit later on in Adventures in Tepest, where she can create powerful monsters. And those powerful monsters are her children. One of her curses is that Lorinda is kind of a fertility goddess to the people, but she herself, she can't make her children live for very long. most of her children kind of die out, or like break apart or go feral. So that's kind of like her desperate, like her desperate torment is the fact that, yeah, she defeated her sisters and she imprisoned them, in fact, but now she's alone and she wants children. And she can't have the children that she wants. In terms of atmosphere and feel, the way it's described is that Tepest has quite a bit of that midsummer movie feel. So very bright and sunny and cheerful. The village of Victal. Let me just go to, where is it? Yeah, there we go. The village of Victal. It's very peaceful. Friendly people go about their business with idyllic simplicity. Families in the community share the crops and resources equally. They welcome visitors, etc., etc., etc. But if you stick around, which is very easy to do because it's just so nice. You don't have to pay for your lodgings. You get free food. The people are really nice. But if you stick around long enough, the time of the tithe is going to come. And then you're definitely not going to want to be in Tepest anymore. I do wish that they provided a bit more explanation about some of the locations. Again, I consider myself to be a pretty good DM, a pretty creative DM, I would say. And so I can come up with a lot of cool stuff myself. I can take some names and be inspired by them and stuff like that. But even so, it's like a really big map with a lot of locations on it, but the only place of interest, it seems, the way it's described, is really Victal. So, again, a little puzzled by these decisions. The Gurgil. Lorinda does have a daughter, Laorsi, but Laorsi is you don't want to run into Laorsi. Lorinda keeps her not chained up, but kept safe for a reason. So there's some good stuff like Mount Arak, by the way. You can find information about Mount Arak, which used to be its own domain, by the way. But if you want Unseelie Fae, if you wanted a place to put the Drow, for example, somewhere, or maybe the Shadar-kai, for example, or Darklings, this is a good place to put them in. In fact, Mount Arak, like I said, it used to be its own domain, and you can still run it as its own domain. Actually, would be pretty cool. If you're familiar with Sly Flourish's Return to Grendelroot, you could actually replace Mount Arak with Grendelroot, and I think it would work very well. Okay, so Dark Lord, we already talked about her. Genres, so obviously it suggests folk horror, but psychological horror can work very well because you're making all kinds of, you could be forced to make all kinds of dark bargains, plus just witnessing some of the rituals and also bumping into some of the things that you could run into in Tepest could definitely leave some psychological scars. And I think body horror can work very well, especially with the themes of transformation and fertility. Think of the body horror in alien movies, right? Like unwanted pregnancies, right? You could lean into that in Tepest, and I think it would be very effective. So I think psychological and body horror can work well. In terms of its atmosphere and feel, I kind of went over it. I do want to also mention that it reminds me. So this is another criticism I have of the domain of Kartakas, is that a lot of the stuff that Kartakas tries to do, we see here in Tepest, only it's described better and it fits together better. So a lot of this kind of idyllic surroundings that hide much darker things works a lot better in Tepest, in my opinion, than in Kartakas, for example. All right, and on to the GM tools, and this is another reason why this domain is one of my favorite in this book. It didn't used to be one of my favorite in previous editions, but in this book I really like it, and part of the reason for that is the GM tools. So first of all, adventures in Tepest. So there's a lot of different adventures you can do. You don't have to do the whole like tithe and folk horror, although that would be very neat. You can do survival. You can do things. You can do some like fairy tale type stuff. You could do like wicked fairies stealing children if you wanted to, and all that kind of stuff. Tepest adventures. You get 10. You get 10 adventure seeds. Not all of them are very good, but some of them are really, really good. The Brigdera one is pretty good. If you know the Dolmenwood setting, which is coming to Kickstarter soon, there's a wonderful setting for old school for like OSR, old school Renaissance games, so that you could use in Tepest very easily. There's all kinds of other pretty neat stuff here. Okay, and so yes, you get 10 adventure seeds, most of which are pretty good, and then you get the tithe, and of course, the tithe, right? Oh, look at this dwarf! He's so happy, right? He's not aware that he is actually the tithe, and there's stuff coming to receive that tithe. So it has a lot of information in the adventure tools about Victal. But what I really like are these tables. So there's a table, Sites in Victal. So if you wanted some ideas for really creepy folk folk traditions, here you go. And I think that Tepest is one of like the most R-rated potential domains in this book, and I think that whoever wrote it, I'm not sure actually who wrote Tepest, but man, they've got some imagination. They've got some creepy imagination. So you get a bunch of interesting rituals. You've got information about the tithe and what happens during the tithe. So it's like this festival, for the mother, but in truth, it's meant to prepare one of the villagers or outsiders, if possible, to be slaughtered by Lorinda's child, the latest Liorsi, because, again, she doesn't stick around. She kind of tends to fall apart. And then you get like this tithe event. So what kind of creepy events, competitions might happen during the tithe? And then finally, then there's like the whole ritual of Mother's Blessing. And then, okay, what is Lorinda's daughter now? And I like this because it's a neat way to reflavor monsters, right, from Monster Manual. Like a Minotaur is not in Monster Manual. The Minotaur is not an especially frightening enemy. Like, oh, okay, it's a half bull, half man. But what if it was a giant upright walking ram, like Black Phillip from the excellent movie The Witch, right? Or you wanted a wicker man? Well, reflavor Shambling Mount. Now you got like this humanoid made of wicker, giant shrieking bipedal sheep. Take a Goristro, right, like that demon, and now he's just giant shrieking bipedal sheep. Like, that's pretty terrifying. Anyway, so I really like these GM tools, and I think that they're quite inspirational to me personally. And that's Tepest. Okay, and on to the last domain, which is Valachan. Oh, I pronounce it Valachan. Maybe it's Valachan. I'm not sure. I pronounce it Valachan. And Valachan is another old domain. It's been around again since 2nd edition. And in my opinion, much like Tepest, and I think it's more obvious here, is that it's not supposed to be a remake, but it is actually a direct continuation of the storyline. Because it does talk about some of the events that happened in the old Valachan. And what happened to its previous Dark Lord, and why is there this new Dark Lord, and like why is this domain like so different now from what it used to be. And Valachan is a domain that very much focuses on wilderness survival. And so if you're familiar, and I think the story that has the most to do, like the story that is the biggest inspiration for Valachan is The Most Dangerous Game, right? About like this hunter who ends up on an island, and then he is being hunted for sport. Spoilers. And this was the theme of the old Valachan, with the brutal, aristocratic Baron Ulrich von Harkov. Even his name sounds like the antagonist, the villain from Most Dangerous Game. But von Harkov is dead now, and is instead replaced by a different hunter altogether. And I think that, like Richemulot, it does lean into some of the themes of colonialism and post-colonialism, and like the idea that sometimes the fight for liberation is so brutal that what comes after you've been liberated from your oppressors, from your colonial oppressors, is just as bad. And that's the case with the Dark Lord in this domain, Chakuna. And there's a great picture of her later on. So this domain is very much focused on hostile wilderness, survival games, brutality of nature, but also like reckoning with colonial past, and also like a game of wits as well. So in that regard, you could easily take a lot of the stuff from Tomb of Annihilation and just put it into Valachan, or go the other way around. You can take a lot of the stuff from Valachan, especially like the Trial of the Hearts, and you could put that in Tomb of Annihilation. So the whole idea in the Valachan is that as soon as you enter, or almost as soon as you enter this domain, you are now being hunted by pretty much everything. Pretty much everything in this domain wants to eat you, from the insects to the plants to the displacer beasts, were jaguars and stuff like that. And your only hope to escape Valachan is that you have to participate in the Trial of Hearts. It is kind of a ceremonial hunt, except that people really do die during it. And if you succeed in the Trial of Hearts, then then the Dark Lord of the domain, Chakuna, she will set you free. And she is a pretty honorable Dark Lord. Like, she will hunt you. Until the trial is over. But if you survive, if you make it to a certain place, she will let you go. So I kind of like that. A more honorable Dark Lord. That's kind of neat. So features, it's a lot of jungle, right? It's a lot of jungles and rivers and lakes and mountains. And the creator of the writer of the domain in this edition kind of said that they were very much inspired by the Mesoamerican, Mayan, Incan history, civilization, and like the Yucatan geography and climate. So you kind of know hopefully you kind of know what you're getting. So like Tomb of Annihilation, you get humid jungles, dense humid jungles, great rapids and waterfalls and rivers and impenetrable mountains and things like that. In terms of its description, in terms of like locations that are described, I think that it actually does a pretty good job. It does describe a number of locations, particularly the ones that are going to be important to the Trial of the Hearts, and the kind of like the few places where where the player characters might be somewhat safe, like Ocello, for instance, and Shuaran in particular. So it's pretty well detailed, in my opinion. Unfortunately, from what I found when I went back to some of the older sources, for example, the older Dread Realms Ravenloft book, which kind of provided like more information about the Dark Lords and the domains. I noticed that Valachan has changed quite a bit, but I think you could pretty easily adopt like older locations, change them, just change their names to the new names, and it should be fine. Shouldn't be that difficult. As for the Dark Lord, so as I've said, well, Chakuna is actually a continuation. She's the slayer of Ulrich von Harkov, and she took his place, but by doing so, she literally lost her heart, and she became a were-jaguar, were-panther. You use the stats for were-tiger, but I think you could also do some pretty neat stuff, like to make it more flavorful and like make it more of a, panther. She has no heart, literally. Nice touch. And so that's kind of how she kills her prey. She hunts down others and she takes their heart. And again, this is another interesting thing that makes her kind of a unique Dark Lord. So not only is she a fairly honorable one, like she will honor her word, at least according to this book, but she's also a willing. Dark Lord. She understands that someone must propitiate the land. And so she's going to be fiercely protective of her people, but everyone else, all the outsiders, are fair game. Which makes her, she is an opponent. She's still terrifying, but she's also she's a bit sympathetic as well. Adventures in Valachan, a lot of beasts, of course. You can put in dinosaurs, you can put in displacer beasts, a lot of plant creatures. So if you're a fan of like plant monsters, not that there are a lot, but there's enough, you can also put them in here. It's gonna be pretty great for that. Genres. So in terms of genres, it recommends gothic horror. Oops. Yeah, so it kind of recommends gothic horror and slasher horror. I can see the slasher horror angle for sure, because you're constantly being hunted by beings you can't necessarily kill, or you can't kill all of them. Gothic horror, I don't know. Maybe a bit. Maybe I'm missing something. I think body horror can work as well. If you think of some of the gruesome scenes from King Kong, both the newest ones, Skull Island, but also King Kong by Peter Jackson. That one in particular has some really gnarly, like giant insect or giant worm type stuff going on, and that would fit really well in Valachan. So you could do some pretty gnarly body horror. So atmosphere and feel, you're being hunted. It's a jungle. Kind of know what you're getting. It's all about survival. You're not going to get a lot of like really deep political intrigue here, like you would get in some of the other domains. But but if it's about like survival and hunting or being hunted, then this is a good fit. She has a good picture. Okay, so actually, onto the GM tools. I'll get to the picture later. I'm sure it'll come up. So this is another domain where the GM tools, in my opinion, are also a bit of a one note, like Falkovnia and Richemulot, but that one note is very strong. So it provides you with 8 adventure seeds that are pretty good. For example, the Tyrannosaurus Rex that called Mother Heartless, I like it. There's another Tyrannosaurus Rex in Tomb of Annihilation, and it can like Misty Step at will, and like has a bunch of other abilities. You could like take that Tyrannosaurus Rex and like repurpose it, or like Sapient Giant Spider. Kind of calls to mind a little bit of like the Anansi myths, like Anansi stories of Anansi, but also Shelob, for example. So some neat stuff. And then of course there's a lot about the Trial of Hearts. Oh yeah, this is the picture. So this is Chakuna with a displacer beast who is hunting the hunter, right? And so as I've said, it has a very strong one note in his GM tools, and that is about running the trial of the heart. So that's the adventure that they want you to do in this domain, because that's what all the GM tools are about. It's about how do you run that trial of hearts, for example, dangers of the trial, completing the trial, how do you get there, what are the win conditions. The hunt complications, I really like these, and there is, as you can see, there is 17 of them. 18 to 20 is no complication, and I really like this. I really like this chart, and I kind of wish I had it when I ran Tomb of Annihilations, because some of these are really interesting ideas. Like in addition to the 8 adventure seeds, a lot of these complications could actually be like little adventures in their own right. So I'm quite happy with it. So like Falkovnia, like Richemulot, you've got the tools here to make a very exciting jungle survival adventure. And that's Valachan. And that brings us to the end of the Domains of Dread, or almost, because there are also other Domains of Dread. And they are much shorter than the ones in the first 4 videos, including this one. So if you'd like me to do a quick dive into these other domains, and maybe a bit about their history and like what they used to be in other editions and kind of what they are now, please let me know in the comments below, and maybe I'll put together a video. It could be I think it could be pretty fun to look at Sire 1313, the Morning Rail, and see some of the other classic domains that are now a lot shorter than they used to be. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a thumbs up. If you have any comments about the videos or about any of the domains I covered, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I will gladly read and answer them. Once again, thank you very much for watching. My name is Arseni, and see you next time.